Hi, welcome to another Great Maihana webinar. I'm Sandra Alexander, and I'm a speech therapist. I also have a son on the spectrum. So this one is about educational placement options. And there's a lot of them, and it can be confusing, but we'll try to simplify it. And remember, you're the most vital member of your child's IEP team or placement option team. So here's some background information. An IEP, which is an individualized education plan, is the plan that helps all the other services and other things they want to do to help your child. With that plan, it can happen. It has annual goals and objectives, it's individualized, and it should be, they talk about the least restrictive environment, least restrictive environment, which isn't a place. It just seems like one. So let's learn some more about it. As a parent with a child with special needs, it's confusing. You have a lot of choices. And let's find out more about them. So there's all the placement options. As you can see here, there's a general education class, an inclusion class, a special education class, a self-contained or standalone special education class, or just a special ed school where the whole school is special education. And this is an overview of the kind of options that you'll be facing. Let's find out more about each one of them. First of all, with an IEP, the I is the most important part. It's individualized, and there's supports that are available to your child. They'll talk about people, you'll hear professionals talk about accommodations for your child and modifications, and it's easy to mix them up. An accommodation is a support that helps your child do better in school with an IEP to complete the same work. And actually, a modification is a change to the kind of work that's expected. So an accommodation, for example, would be, you might be where it's the same work, but your child might be placed next to a peer to help him. But the kind of work that's expected has not been changed. There's a lot of possibilities, and people get really creative with these. Also, with a modification, though, they could be a change to the amount of work that's expected or the kind of work that's expected. And we'll get a little bit more specific as we keep going further. So in a general education class, there's mainstreaming, there's a general education teacher. You can have full or part-time or part-day participation. There's supports and services, and of course, as always, accommodations and modifications. So if you have a child who's who has an IEP, and it might be your child, of course, and they're in a special ed class, they're in a general education class, excuse me. This is a quote unquote typical classroom, if such things exist anymore, because things are a little crazy right now, as we know. But if everybody thinks, let's put them in general ed, but maybe make accommodations, the general education teacher is going to try to help your child with this, and will know that your child has an IEP. So you might be there, your child might be there the full day or part of the day. And here's an example. A child named John was assessed and showed that he was on grade level for everything except math, where he really, really struggled. So his IEP his team decided that he would benefit for being pulled out of general ed just for math and having more direct instruction on math. And he left class, he'd get math instruction, and then come back and join his class. So the benefits for the general education class is every student with an IEP will have some type of support or accommodation. And you might get other services while in general ed, like occupational therapy or speech therapy. And a lot of times a child is pulled out of class, but it doesn't have to be that way. The person can come into your class, and that's called a push-in model, and sit with your student or sit with a group of students who need that help and give it to them there. There's all kinds of just different combinations of services in this domain. An aide can help your class, your student as well with this. And A child can also get counseling, social skills help, emotional social needs help in a general ed environment. And you'll hear a term that's called a paraprofessional. That's generally an aide. When they say para, this is somebody who's an aide, but they're not necessarily a certificated person who has all the education, but it's a lot of times somebody with a whole lot of experience or a parent that's helping out and they know what's going on. So they're very valuable. And through teacher direction, an aide can provide the student with the support they need and help with behavior management or help them interact with the other kids in the class. So there'll be all kinds of accommodations and modifications that could be made in this domain. Now, an inclusion class can have 2 teachers, once again, full or part-day participation, support services, accommodations, and modifications. So a unique aspect of inclusion classes is that it is a general education class specifically designed to support kids with IEPs. And it'll be in a class with non-disabled peers. So it'll be like a class within a class, which is kind of cool. So the teaching model is either 2 teachers that are co-teaching each parts of the class. It could be like that. Or let's say the general ed teacher teaches the majority of the class, and then the special ed teacher teaches specific curriculum for those kids. They'll support those students while the general ed teacher does most of the general ed education. So the educators are collaborating with each other. And it can be very helpful to kids as well. Most students with IEPs are placed in inclusion classes at first to participate for the full day. But with an IEP, which is individualized, that can be tweaked depending on how your kid's doing. Here's an example. A child named Casey needs supports for the inclusion class, and for most of his learning, because he can't understand what he's reading very well. He has trouble with comprehension. So he goes to the special education class for his reading. All the support services and accommodations and modifications are noted for general education and are applied in the inclusion class, but he might even get pulled out for the reading and put back in. Another example is a child named Danny who has difficulty with handwriting. So his occupational therapist comes into the classroom and helps him with writing and works with him within that classroom. He might have a special desk that's designed for him or placed differently so that he can write better or see the teacher or see the board better. Now, special education class, it has a resource teacher, a special ed teacher. It could be part-time or part-day participation, a smaller number of kids. Typically for language arts and or math, has different curricula, accommodations and modifications, and supports and services. So if your child needs more help, basically, and more direct special education instruction, then that's what is possible in the other 2 scenarios we've already discussed. He may go to a special education class. It's taught by a special education teacher, and the students are scheduled to come to the class for specific work areas. They don't necessarily stay all day, though some can be that way. So a student with an IEP participates in small group instruction with other students with similar challenges with a particular subject. So this could be for math or for science or social studies, and then goes back to his regular ed class. It is most desirable that the curricula used in the resource room is a lot like the general ed curriculum, but it can be modified and often is for a student's needs. For example, a child named Ben, who's a first grader, has an IEP because he has dyslexia. And after trying various supports and accommodations, the team decided to implement reading milestones curriculum, and he did well with that, but that was a special curriculum and that wasn't being used with everybody else within his class, but that's the best for him, so that's helping him. It was individualized. The next example is a self-contained special education classroom with a special education teacher, a limited class size, full or part day participation, specialized instruction, alternate curriculum, accommodations and modifications, and supports and services. So this self-contained classroom is a classroom environment with students with IEPs only. There's no general ed in that room. It's taught by a special education teacher with the training by state code, and the number of students is generally small. It helps children who have needs with behavior. They might need more breaks. They might have, they need a whole lot more support and might need their own aid. And that helps in this classroom environment. So it really is trying to give the most support to your child as your child needs. So for example, if your child needs to be one-on-one with somebody and you try things and you take notes and it's discrete trial, that's what you do. But that doesn't mean everybody else in that room would get that. Everybody has their own way of learning, and that'll be determined individually. So most often if a child with an IEP in this environment requires a lot of support, and the curricula is often different for these children. They'll get other supports as well. So here's an example. Harrison, who's 5 years old, has autism. He has limited verbal skills and social skills, and he struggles with understanding what's said to him. So he's in a special ed class, but his strengths is that he likes letters and numbers, and he can even identify some sight words, but he doesn't know what they mean, but he can read them. So it was determined he'd benefit from being in a self-contained classroom with special education supports and in the inclusion class for circle time, so he gets kind of used to what typical 5-year-old behavior is. And he's out there for lunch and recess, but a lot of the academics, almost all of them, are in a special ed classroom. And he has his aid. He might get special transportation. He'll get speech. He might get OT services in this scenario as well. And then there's a special education school. So that's a separate school. It could be public or private. It has special needs students. All the teachers are special educators. There's all the children in that school are getting an alternative curriculum. They're getting the supports and services, modifications, and accommodations. So this means, for example, if you have a child that they've tried everything in the other school, that is a more typical school environment, and it's not working, he may go to a special school. He may have to go to a school in a different district for this to happen. And that's called an ODD placement, which is out of district placement. And so it's a different building. All the students need the help that are there, and all the staff has a better understanding of special education and has more training in it. It's all driven by the IEP, and it can help a lot of children. And here's an example. A child named Nate had parents who were very involved with his IEP. And initially, he was 2 years in a self-contained education classroom, special ed classroom, but he didn't make a lot of progress. They tried to tweak things in that environment. It didn't work as well. So the IEP even hired an outside consultant, and they tried other things. It wasn't working for him. So they moved him to a special ed school for children with autism. And within 6 months, he was doing better in that environment. So remember, the I in IEP is individualized. There's many supports. Least restricted environment is not a place. It's the best way your student can learn. So least restrictive can be general education. It could also be in a special education school. And your educational placement can change as an IEP changes. So it's not set in stone. And you are the most important part of the team. Be very active to make sure everything is implemented, because when you go to a meeting, things will get talked about, but you need to look out for the best services for your child. And if there needs to be a change and it needs to be made sooner rather than later, please advocate for it, because the people in the school do want to help your child. And if you're making your needs known, they'll be able to help you better because they know that you're involved and your child really needs the help. Once again, thank you for listening to this webinar from my Hannah, and have a great day.